I just wear a lot of black and like very like edgy clothing, but when people meet me in person, they're like, oh, you look really scary online, and then they're like, oh, you're actually a much nicer person than I thought in person. But I think because I curate like my feed way more, they only see like a very specific side. It's like the tattoos, the clothing, and they're like, oh, she's like really edgy and like, you know, aloof or unapproachable. Then they meet me in person. I think I'm a much warmer person than I give off online, if that makes sense. So for people that don't know me, I go by B, or online people I guess know my internet alias as bchan, bchan.png. My name's Bethany, and I'm a tattoo artist and designer based in Chicago. My parents never really discouraged me from doing anything creative necessarily, but obviously not as a career. That was a decision that I made kind of on my own as I got older. And I remember at one point my dad was just talking to me about it right before I went into pursuing design as a career and for school. And he just tells me, you are living your life for yourself, and you know, there's not really anything that your mom and I can tell you to do or to not do. And whether that's like you want to do something creative, you know, this is a little bit morbid, but he was just like, we're gonna die at the end of the day, so you should just do what you want.
Is it possible to see without like the arm? I'm like trying to decide if I like the arm.
Yeah. I mean, you could do it without the arms or legs if you want to see what that looks like, or just without the arms.
Can we see just?
Art is the thing that kind of ties like humanity together at some points, right? Like you look at art and like whether you understand it or not, if something is beautiful, you know, you'll appreciate it in a different way than other things in the world that you just kind of pass by. I think for me, tattooing is such an intimate and personal practice that, you know, you get to interact with people like one-on-one and at such like a close physical and like sometimes emotional level that once you're done with it, it's hard to describe how it feels, especially for people that are so appreciative of the art and the craft. I wouldn't give it up for anything just because of the way that, you know, my clients specifically come to me for work and are touched by, you know, the work that they get from me. And that's something that I definitely missed during pandemic and lockdown and all of that, was like that interpersonal connection. And I was kind of lacking that from design as well, because I would oftentimes create these things, flyers, posters, ads, whatever it may be, and just like putting them out into the world, and then they just disappear. And you don't know who they impact and what they're really doing out there. Really mattered when I was kind of doing that. But like the process of doing a tattoo is just so unique to each person, and there's something very emotional about it and also very rewarding. And I think that is partially why I keep pursuing it. But there is a small part of me that is such a perfectionist that like when I finally get something right, even if after the fact I like look at it and I'm like, wow, I really hate this. But when you do get it right in the moment, it feels so good. And then you keep just chasing that creative high over and over again, even though it may not come for like 50 or like 100 pieces of work that you do. It just takes that one time and you're like, okay, I can do it again. It's pretty nice out today too.
Yeah, it's not like super hot.
I was gonna say it's supposed to get pretty hot this week. Yeah, like later this week and then next week too. I think there's a lot of unspoken pressure, especially in Asian households, especially as a first gen. And I'm the oldest out of my siblings and myself, so it wasn't necessarily that they tried to push anything on me, but for me, I think a huge measure of success for a lot of Asian households is, oh, you have to have a really good job and like make good money so you can support your family, like give back to your family, because they sacrifice so much for you and being able to provide an opportunity for their kids that you want to be able to give that back to them in like tenfold, essentially. And that is really difficult because it wasn't even that my parents were necessarily giving me that pressure. It was myself and wanting to help my parents in some way eventually. There is so much uncertainty that comes with a creative path. I would say I didn't expect this level of success going into the profession because you kind of go into those things fearing for the worst, right? But at this point, they kind of know my career and the choices that I'm making, and they see that I'm happy, and I think that's the biggest thing for them. It's not even about me necessarily giving back what I'm doing now, and them knowing that I'm very happy doing what I'm doing and I'm able to kind of sustain myself in this career is more than enough for them. Though I will say, I'm sure my mom will appreciate the gifts that I can at least afford to give her now. And she's like, oh, you have a stable job. Somewhat stable in quotation marks, you know. But hopefully in the future I can get to that point where I'm able to give them back more than just my own personal happiness, if that makes sense.
I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for coming back.
Oh, of course.
To see the new studio.
Yes, I love it.
That's something that I'm still coming to terms with a lot of the times, because I know that there are specific things that when I output them, they won't necessarily do well, which is really terrible to think about and to say out loud, because you don't necessarily pursue things because they'll do well, right? It's about learning, and I think that's the biggest part that helps you kind of grow and mature as a creative. But I think in the case of tattoos, it's even more difficult. Tattoos, and I would say other creative practices in general, it kind of becomes a second job, right? You have to think about how things will perform, and that makes it even, I would say, more difficult to want to create stuff, because you kind of become locked in the space of, oh, what do I want to do, but what do people also want to see? And you kind of fight that every time that you're making something. And sometimes I think it's just about taking a step back and being like, who I'm making this for. And I think that's really important, especially in tattoos and tattooing, because it's something that's going to be on someone's body forever. And you don't just want to follow something because it's trendy or you think it'll do well on Instagram or, you know, TikTok, for example. Which is why I think I've come to a point where I've definitely been posting a lot less, because I think part of it is just this anxiety around wondering if something will perform well versus, you know, there's nothing that really beats seeing your client happy at the end of the day. Whether you like get something that you can post online, I think that matters less to me now. And like the numbers, obviously it hurts to see the way that people will perceive your work and like it or not like it just based on like photos or videos. But I think just learning to care less about that and more so pursuing things for, you know, your own creative practice and just to learn and to grow. Obviously it's easier said than done, because you know, there's a balance between sustaining yourself creatively and also in like a capitalist society, it's really difficult to make ends meet if you're not hitting certain metrics, right? And a huge part of tattooing is like that too, because a lot of my client base comes from social media. So it is a tricky balance, but I think I'm just coming to terms with the fact that if I'm doing things for my own personal growth, they feel a lot more rewarding than just pumping things out like continuously on social media just for the sake of trying to hit certain numbers or a certain audience all the time, because it'll definitely burn you out. I think that's something that I've always struggled with creatively, is like this impending doom, right? But it also comes with life in general and like the insecurities that surround, am I doing enough? And applying that to also creative practice becomes even more difficult to navigate, I think. I don't know if there's really an answer to it, because it hasn't really gone away for me. And I don't know if I've found a specific answer, but I've found that just continuing to do the work has helped. So no matter how scared I am to do something, or if I want to try something new, tattooing, for example, was like a huge example of that. And I still don't know, you know, how sustainable this career is for me, because it's very hard on your body. And a lot of creative careers kind of push you to that point, because there's a lot of mental and emotional strain that comes with pursuing something that you don't know whether it'll succeed or not. But whether it's creative or not creative, that can be the case with anything in life. It is difficult to overcome that fear, but it almost is better that you just chase it down and you try it and have it fail than not do it at all. I think that's the worst thing for me. And I've kind of treated a lot of my pursuits like that because I've like worked so many different jobs. Like a lot of the times I hated a lot of them. So, you know, I don't necessarily regret doing them, but I think if I hadn't done them, I probably would have regretted more, because you kind of learn what you like and you don't like in that way, and what you're capable of, you know, even despite fearing something. And I think it's one thing to be afraid and one thing to let that fear inhibit you from doing what it is that you want to do. So, you know, despite all of that, you could just go for it, and maybe it'll help drive you in some way, you know.